is Taylor, and we're here to talk about The Haunting of Bly Manor on All Access.
Hi, I'm Andy Grush, another Newton brother, and we're here with All Access to talk about Bly Manor and meaning of life and whatever else comes up.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. It's such an honor to have you guys on to talk. And I was going to reach out to you guys earlier, but I wanted to finish Bly Manor first so we can really talk in detail about it. So,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So before we jump to Bly Manor, let's kind of rewind back. And I know we did an interview a few years ago, but maybe to refresh some people who may are finding your music for the first time. Talk about your guys' kind of early influences when you were growing up. What kind of triggered this path into music, and what made you guys want to be composers?
I think for me, I started with piano when I was very young. I started playing the Suzuki method piano lessons, which I loved at first, but eventually I sort of fell in, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark. As I started seeing films and experiencing more music, I kind of fell more and more deeply in love with, the idea of writing music, playing music, listening to music within the context of, media, film and TV specifically. And that just kind of just drove me constantly. And I think that technology sort of doing what it's done in my lifetime has sort of added to that and given me the ability to, the first time someone told me I could get some software that would allow me to record myself as many times as I wanted to, it just kind of blows your mind and opens the possibilities. So that's sort of the beginning of the path for me.
And Taylor, how about you?
My whole family was involved in music, and my mom was singing opera. My dad was in bands, and even my grandfather played in the symphony. And so it was always around. And I grew up, on the Beatles, and also going to see films like E.T. and I think around the time, I think it was E.T. or Jaws, I just got really, really kind of sucked into what film music does to you, and with the imagery and the pictures, and I just kind of became super fascinated by it, and that kind of led me through being in different bands and starting groups, and then begging college kids when I was 16 to score their short films, and they'd be like, "What have you done?" And I would be like, "I've done nothing, but I have this great idea." And that kind of led me to the path of I ended up working for different producers, and then assisting for other people, and it kind of brought me to this point.
And where you guys originally from, and when did you guys come to LA? Or were you guys from here? Or?
I'm born and raised in LA. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm actually from Orange County originally. I was born primarily and raised in Costa Mesa.
Oh, okay. So you guys didn't have to relocate and move your lives over here. Kind of just grew up within the community, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not too bad. Yeah, it worked out great. Yeah.
And when did you two guys meet and kind of started? Maybe this might work as a partnership.
I was working for Hans Zimmer at the time, actually. It was right around 2005. We decided to start working on stuff together. We met through a mutual friend in 2001 when I moved to LA, actually. Mm-hmm. And I had been a big fan of Andy's because he did a movie called Mothman Prophecies that I loved. He was one of the writers on it, and it was super, super dark and bleak, and I loved it. And so we just became really good friends and started writing on each other's stuff. And then right around the time I left working at Remote Control, we started writing on just indie movies, and then that was kind of the beginning of that sort of culmination.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, was there a connection when you guys first met that you knew that this could be something as a creative partnership?
Yeah, we just got along really well, and I don't think we were ever thinking too far ahead in the future. Early on, it was just like we'd get together, and Taylor had recorded a really great album actually, and invited me over to his house, and we would listen through things and talk through things. And there's just it just kind of came together real nicely. We have a lot in
Yeah.
common, and yeah, just a weird, like, it's weird with music. You just kind of like vibe with people, and you just kind of run with it. And it's weird it's weird that it's been this long.
Like a marriage.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is. It has to be, because you guys are we working together, and it's the most, and it's an intimate thing. You guys are really working in the nitty gritty of the emotional kind of core of the film and everything. And you have to like the person you're going to be with during the trenches.
Absolutely.
Big time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, you guys are not blood brothers. You are not related. But I think, Taylor, you were telling me one time that it was your mutual love of Isaac Newton. Is that what came up with the Newton brothers?
Yeah. At the time we wanted kind of a name that didn't have our names associated. We were working, we had day jobs, and we both loved Isaac Newton, just kind of the whole idea how math works into music. And that's kind of where it derived from. And then we just, the projects we did just kept growing and growing, and it just stuck with us. And that's kind of where we are.
Awesome. And so I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but what is your kind of a working approach? And I'm sure it differs from film to film, but is there like a stock maybe approach that you have when you first are tackling a project? Do you guys sit down, then go work separately, or do you guys continually working together on certain things, or kind of what's the general kind of feeling that you guys do?
We usually kind of nerd out with each other kind of exhaustively at first. Like before we even write any music at all, we have lengthy conversations. We go through the material. If there's a book, we'll read the book. If there's previous books, we'll read those books. If there's scripts, we'll read the scripts. And then from that information and the story and any information we have from the director or producers, we'll kind of go in to a sort of research and development phase where we'll talk about instrument ideas and thematic ideas, and what if we tried this, and what if we did this, and what about this instrument. And we just kind of don't have any rules. We kind of just lean into opening up the doors to whatever. And then after we've exhausted each other infinitely with ideas and suggestions and blah, 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 we actually just kind of go away for a period of time, depending on what the project allows. Taylor and I will just sort of not talk we'll talk to each other, but not really about what we're working on. And then we'll bring our ideas together. And then from there, we start to sort of suss out like, oh, hey, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. That's cool. That's working. And sometimes Taylor will take files I've worked on and adjust them, change them, rearrange them. Sometimes he'll record his own sort of ideas on top of them, or it's just sort of, it becomes very fluid then, because at that point, after we've sort of gotten each other involved, then it's just sort of on the journey to getting it played for the director so that he or she can, give us notes or sort of guide us further. And that's sort of how the process begins almost every time, regardless of the scope of the project, whether it's a huge project or the smallest of projects. We kind of tackle it that way each time. Is that right, Taylor?
Yeah, that's right. I think on a technical aspect, though, we also have everything that's synced up the same, so that way we can go back and forth with on the software level, on the suites level, and we have all the themes, we have all the pieces, so it's real easy to kind of manage.
So I'm sure you both have different, if you're thinking, pretend like you aren't working together. If you are presented with a script or on a project or something, and before you guys talk, what's kind of maybe your first inkling of inspiration? Do you like to reflect on the script? You mentioned reading the books. Do you like the conversation with the director first? Where does the first note come from for each of you? What is kind of really sparks that initial idea out of you?
I think it's, it is project by project, and actually time plays a lot into that. Like Dr. Sleep, we had, I feel like 10 or 11 months You know, and on Extinction we had 3 weeks. So it just depends on, you know, the time factor. But if given time and brought on early, you know, we often, you know, if there are books to read, we go through them, and usually very quickly we start talking to the creative about like, hey, what's the direction you want to go? And like on Dr. Sleep, Mike was, you know, he knew he wanted the score not to be melodically driven. He knew certain things that he wanted out of us. So that obviously sparked a lot of creative ideas in just us. And then we do as we always do. We separate, and I had this really crazy idea for this like giant hurdy-gurdy, and you know, and I also had some melody that I wanted to try to bring forward, even if, you know, it was going to be turned down. I actually assumed it was going to be thrown away, but you know, it's like you have to try these things. And I think that initial conversation with the creative, like with Mike in that case, and then obviously diving into reading, you know, The Shining and Dr. Sleep, it just gives you all these different sort of ideas in your head at night. At least, you know, I can't stop thinking about it. It gets like, it's excitement and sort of this fear too. Yeah, getting ready for it. It's this weird sort of balance of those two things that come in, and I think that sort of inspiration, it just, I don't know, stuff just starts coming out. We write all these suites, and that's usually how it starts. And then we sort of start to filter between ourselves, obviously, as Andy said. But that's kind of the beginning.
And so you guys mentioned that it is like a marriage, and I'm sure, of course, all marriages might have some fights. How do you handle disagreements? How do you handle if somebody says, I really want to go in this direction, and somebody might go, well, I think this is the proper way. How do you compromise, and what's kind of, do you guys have fights, or maybe you guys are just get along the entire time?
I mean, we don't really have fights. Like we'll disagree on things, but usually our disagreements we'll have conversations about them, and one of us will present like, well, this is why I think this, and the other one, well, this is why I think that that's not correct. And then at the end of the day, like sometimes we'll make decisions based on what the other person thinks, and then other times we'll just say like, you know, neither of us really have an ego, so we try to check that at the door every day. And then just like at a certain point, it's like, well, the director is going to decide, so let's present it to the director and see what he or she says about what, you know,
and when you're
working.
When you're dealing with multiple versions and multiple ideas, especially early on, you know, having decided on something you want to bring forward and having a few of those strong pieces is really helpful, because what I might think is safe and what he might think is safe can be very different. And it's nice to have something pushed to the edge, and then all of a sudden, you know, the director is like, oh, I really like that. I wasn't thinking that, but and it helps having those ideas, and it's always that kind of collaboration to build off each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll rarely rely on just one piece of music to sort of present. So, because I mean, no one really knows, because there's a weird thing that happens once the music might work beautifully in your head, and then when you see it to the visuals, it just, something doesn't work for some reason. And then that's different for each person, obviously, too. So we're pretty aware of that. So we try to sort of present several options that we like and support, so that we're not just sort of throwing bad ideas, you know, at the canvas, but we'll present the ideas that we think are the strongest. And then from there, that's usually the beginning of sort of the dialogue.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, you work with Mike for across a number of films now, but and composing duos are not a rare thing. There's a few composing duos out there and groups and stuff. But I'm sure most directors, when you're working with them for the first time, maybe they're only used to working with one composer, you know. And so how do you, I guess, establish a relationship with a new director for the first time? And do you have to kind of establish like a communication workflow when it comes to communicating with both of you? And how does that kind of work out near the beginning?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. And we're both very, I would say, because I've worked with a lot of other composers, we're both very hands-on, I would say, more so than most. Like a lot of times when composers are done and they deliver to the dub stage, they're never at the dub stage. One of us are always there, just to kind of make sure it works. And early on, we always spot everything together. We're always in the room together for the most part, unless there's an occasion where something needs to be done. But what's great is that there will usually be a point person for a project as every project comes. Like, for instance, on, let's say, Dr. Sleep, Andy may be the one who's like handling all the major emails, and I may chime in and I may respond now and then, but he's leading sort of the always response. And the same thing, if it's a different project and I'm that person. And it helps having that balance. And also, too, with two people, like, we get emails from directors at like 2 a.m. being like, I really hate the oboe in this cue, and we're like, no problem, and just change, so it's great to have that sort of dialogue. And I feel like the director always, especially in projects you work closely, they always, want to be hands-on with, hey, I like this, I don't like this. And we were changing things, on the fly on Dr. Sleep sometimes. And we've done that on Haunting Bly Manor. They decided to change Hill House, this entire section. So Andy opened the laptop, I went to the studio, and we wrote a new piece of music in like, a couple hours, because that's what needed to be done. So it's nice to have that sort of workflow that I have found, versus if you're just by yourself. So I feel like we get the best of both worlds, because we have these new ideas that we can present, and sometimes in a feeling that's almost more as an individual, but yet we have that collaboration aspect. So it's great.
Yeah, I feel like, and it just must feel good to be able to lean on somebody during during the crazy stuff, during the crazy deadlines and everything, just to go through it with a friend and be like,
oh yeah, sorry.
You mean the cry of tears? Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, we've definitely, been there for each other when it's, there's those days where you're like, this is day number 3, no sleep, so.
Yeah, it gets rough sometimes. Like just the camaraderie of having each other sometimes is just like a massive benefit to just like, oh my gosh, like you didn't sleep last night either. Like, is this it? Like, what's happening today? It's good. It's helpful.
I want to go back to talking about Mike Flanagan. Of course, I do have to give a shout out to Mike. Me and him share the same alma mater. We both went to Towson University. He's about 9 years older than me, so we didn't share a campus at any given time. And I've never met Mike, but it's just really cool that a great auteur director found 2 auteur composers and built this relationship. So I really think it's awesome.
he would love that. No, he totally appreciates that kind of stuff. So he would be he'll love this.
Yeah, just the fact that small Maryland film school. No, but Towson University is usually not on the map for anybody, but that's where I got my degree, and so did Mike. So that's cool.
It's awesome.
But so yeah, talk about meeting Mike, because I think the first project you guys worked on was Oculus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did you? Because I think he made a short or a feature film before that, kind of like through crowdfunding and stuff. But how did you guys get involved with Oculus? Because that was based on a short, I think he did, or a mini series, little web series or something.
A short. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. We were brought in. Sort of through an interview process, actually, with for Oculus, and we sat down with Mike and one of his producers, Trevor Macy, and their other producer, Nancy, and that was the first time we had met any of them, actually. And I think Mike showed us some of the film, actually.
He did.
Several parts of the film, and it was very disturbing. Middle of the day, still very disturbing, and we had a great conversation about it. And that was it. We kind of jumped into Oculus, and it was great because when we jumped into Oculus, we were able to sort of approach things both melodically and from the standpoint of incorporating some, I don't know, dread is the wrong word, but just sort of a subtle menacing characteristic as well.
Yeah, like a brooding, kind of a building brooding type
exactly
thing.
Yeah. And it was just such a pleasure and a joy to work with Mike on that, because he had such a great vision and knew what he wanted and was open to new ideas and enjoyed sort of the process of, discovering, the sort of sonic soundscape that, we were all sort of, searching out and coming up with. So it was a lot of fun. It was, yeah, I'm not articulating that very well. Taylor, do you want to add anything?
No, yeah. He showed us footage and we fell in love with it. I think initially he was really wanting a very sound-based score, very atonal. And, we were able to squeeze in some melody that was, they weren't expecting towards the very end of the film. And, we had to try it, and it was a little scary because on a new relationship, there's always that fear of getting fired, considering we were actually not the first composer. We were the second composer. They had let go of the first composer. So that didn't work out. And so, we didn't know them well enough to feel like, hey, let's just, try this. But we did, and it worked out great. And I think they appreciated the gesture. But it's interesting because they have a very similar sensibility that we have, and they like a lot of the same music. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. Mike has a lot of the same vinyl that we have, and he likes a lot of the same music he grew up on, Cocoon and like all these classics. And so we didn't know at the time, but it was just a really good match.
Yeah. So did you guys have any inkling that you're going to get a phone call for the second date technically? Or do you think it was like, oh, that was nice, I hope he calls back? Or did you have a feeling that you guys, maybe we'll work with him again someday?
I mean, you always hope, I feel like you do your best work, you try your hardest with every director. You want to build that relationship, but you don't ever know. And for some people, they express it in different ways. And, I think Mike expressed it, I think, more at the end. He was really appreciative of the job that was done. But, when a director's in the middle of it, they're incredibly busy with, the post and the sound, and then there's the politics of the studio and whatever else they have to deal with in their personal life. So, we always want to make sure they're happy. That's really the end of the day. It's a key, like, are they the happiest they can be? That's the goal. We want to kind of exceed expectations for every project. And it seemed to be that way. And of course, when they invite you back for another project, you're like, oh, I guess it didn't go so badly. You know what I mean?
Right. And I mean, moving forward, you guys have worked on, after Oculus, every single one of his productions, I think, right? Every single thing that he's done. So it's been such an amazing ride. How has that relationship changed from Oculus down to now with Bly Manor? I'm sure there's more shorthand, more trust, but did you feel it kind of shifting as it was progressing, or did you weren't paying attention to it?
I don't think we were really paying attention to it, but we've definitely established a bit of it's really nice because, especially on creative things, Mike knows he can just tell us straight up like what he's feeling, like love this, hate this, flush this down the toilet, like, dress this up and send it off into the sunset. It's we don't need to spend too much time sort of navigating discussions around what's working and what's not. And that's been really nice. And as we've worked on more and more projects, that sort of shorthand, we kind of know things that he enjoys more than others, but we don't put the things that have not worked in a box that is like locked away, because those things may work at another time. Like when we did Hush was a very different score than Before I Wake or Oculus. And it was important for us to not sort of, throw out things that weren't working for those two films, because they were very different. Just as, even Bly Manor and Hill House are obviously related, but they're different. So some of the things that weren't working for Hill House did actually work for Bly Manor. So, it's kind of up to us to just go for it. And then we trust that Mike will just tell us, nope, yep, nope, yep, and it's great because we kind of know when he says nope and yep, we kind of know what's, okay, we're going this way now,
Yeah.
or, and it's nice.
I think too, early on, we had that professionalism going with Mike and Trevor. And after years of working with him, I consider Mike a good friend. We've talked about things that have nothing to do with music and things that are just more personal. And he's just always been someone I consider, I can tell things to and that kind of stuff. But when you're beginning on a new project, that's kind of the last thing you want to do. You want to be like telling someone about, let's talk about me and all my, you kind of want to keep it professional. And so it's obviously that element has come in into it. And it also, from the moment we saw Oculus, and actually we watched Absentia, and that was his first film.
Right.
It was like, my mind was blown that he shot that for like, I think it was $60,000. If I'm not.
Yeah, something like that. And in his apartment in Glendale or something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this guy is like amazingly talented, because Andy and I always love working with guys that, are passionate. It's not just a paycheck for them. It's like, it's a passion. Because we've done projects for free, things that have cost us money to do projects, and you do something that you love, and the money comes later. And so we just really loved what he had shot, and then we saw Oculus, and we're like, oh my gosh! And then we're sitting in the studio, and he comes in, and he's like, hey guys, this is great. Maybe we could go to that A minor with the third inversion, and like we're like, whoa, this. We didn't expect this guy. So next thing you know, he's like, he's a musician too. He's, and he gets on the piano and he just rips it out. My mind was just like blown, and I was super impressed. And so the guy is definitely, he's ridiculously talented.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's amazing. But Andy, you mentioned Before I Wake, and I thought that was an interesting score because Danny Elfman was involved in that too. I'm based on those credits, I'm pretty sure you guys didn't work together. Well, what happened? Was it, if you're okay talking about it, did he come in to fill stuff in at the end? Was that just, oh, he's doing his stuff, we finished this, and you guys were able to keep the score in, or what happened there?
No, it was pretty cool. We from the beginning, we sort of all met together.
Oh, really? So it was the beginning, it was planned that way?
Yeah, it was planned that way. Yeah. And the first day we went over to Danny's studio to play cues, I was so nervous. That was probably the most nervous I've been musically in my career. Just, I've had some other moments too, but that one was like, oh, this is what's happening, because, you're about to play something for someone you've, admired and listened to for a long time. So that was pretty terrifying, but Danny's a great composer, and was just very kind in the process. And it was just, it all went very well. We weren't sitting in a studio like jamming on guitars for the score, but it was, we played ideas for him. We heard where he was going with things. And then, cause there had to be sort of a melding of ideas and sound so that it was sort of cohesive all the way through. So that made it, a very fun process. Did I leave anything out, Taylor? That was sort of the overall?
Yeah, he was very collaborative. And I think just to clarify kind of how he got involved, I think, early on, while we were on Oculus, actually, Mike had already written Somnia, and they had already planned to work with Danny before we were. I might have even been hired on Oculus. I don't know on that part.
Somnia is what it was called before it was called Before I Wake. It was called Somnia, which is what we usually refer to it as.
The OG title.
Yeah. So Mike just called us up and said, hey, would you be interested in working with Danny on this project? And we were like, of course, and so I was very excited about it. And then we wrote some themes and ideas, and he wrote some stuff and some themes, and we kind of just got together and we played stuff, and he was super cool about it. And then we kind of went off and did our thing, and he did his thing. And then, Mike sort of steered the ship, and And then next thing you know, we recorded, and that was it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and then so working with Mike, you guys have, I mean, you've done so much great work in other genres and everything, but you really kind of had to focus on, I'll call it horror, even though I wouldn't say that a lot of stuff that Mike does is like pure horror.
Right.
But you guys have had to kind of, so I'm curious how you both view this genre, the horror genre, and all the formulas and archetypes that come with it. And how do you navigate to make sure that the music isn't cliched or it doesn't feel like a product solely meant to follow, the editing for jump scares and stuff? Because you guys, and what I love about your music is somehow find the characters quickly, and it becomes this very emotional journey. And you kind of forget that the suspenseful and the tension part of it is almost like a added bonus, where it's like, okay, it's a character study. So I'm curious how you guys approach that, being kind of working in this horror genre.
No, that's a great question. Go ahead.
I mean, a lot of it is just the early stages of Taylor and I just sort of doing lots of homework. And in addition to that homework, just having sort of the knowledge that we all have, everyone grows up watching films and TV. And so everyone has sort of a knowledge of things they like and what they don't like. And having the knowledge of even composers and films that we've liked in the past sort of give us the palette of like, we know sort of things that have been done, and we're still learning every day. I still come across scores from composers that I didn't even think worked in the horror genre that are brilliant, and I think that like that plays a big part of it. It's sort of, like what they tell you in high school that you never believe, which is like, you really have to know history so you don't like repeat it and blah, 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 like all that stuff. Where in high school, you're just like, yeah, whatever. Like, when are we done? Like, but it's so true. Like, knowing the history of films and TV and film music and regular music and classical music, like everything. I think all of that stuff plays a part in what sort of our approach is. And specific to your question, and within, the horror genre, I mean, it's about telling the story. And I think that's always what we try to latch onto. And Mike champions that. I mean, we really, for the projects we work on with him, he champions that. I mean, projects we work on with other directors, they champion it as well, and it's just, we usually, try to come up with as much sort of thematic material as we can early on. Mm-hmm. And we try to steer that material toward sort of the subject matter that seems relevant, as opposed to like what you might think it is. If you're going into a sci-fi film, you have expectations. So right. We're going to know that. So in part of our conversation, we'll talk about like, do we want to use no synthesizers at all, so that it feels different, or, maybe not. But that's sort of, I know I'm not really answering the question, but it's more of a process.
Yeah.
It's more of the process in coming up with sort of what the themes are. And I think sort of the exhaustive nature of it lends nicely to, the first handful of ideas. There might be something there that works, but it's going to be an iteration of that ends up usually someplace in the project. Not all the time. Sometimes there's a first pass that works magnificently, but other times those iterations are sort of what leads you to a place. And I think that you come up with something that's not what is initially expected. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
I was gonna say, I think more specifically to is what, when you're dealing with certain films and certain directors, you're obviously there's certain boundaries you can and can't do. Mm-hmm. And like Andy was saying, they're going to have certain expectations on, we want it to sound like this, we want it to be like this. And depending on your relationship and how, as how far you can push it and make, to work in that realm, it definitely is informative on your score. It's hard to do something melodic in a movie or theme driven in a movie that's subject to just pure dread and they want only fear and crazy noises. It's difficult to, we try to like squeeze it in sometimes, but it's it's always challenging. It just depends on that sort of ability or availability they're letting you work with.
Absolutely. And I think a great example of how the horror genre kind of just gets blasted away and just the film becomes itself. I think Dr. Sleep is an amazing example of that. I loved Dr. Sleep, and I know I'm telling anyone who's listening or watching, go out and watch it, because I know you didn't, because nobody did, and it bombed, and it's so sad. But I think it's honestly one of your guys' best work and Mike's best work, and it just we watched the director's cut and with my wife, and she's notorious for not liking long movies, but she sat through that entire 3 hours, and it was just like glued to the screen, and that film was just such a perfect follow-up for Kubrick. It was also a perfect adaptation for Stephen King, and it had Mike's voice in it, had your voice in it. Talk about approaching that film, and what were did you have any, were you nervous following in those footsteps, especially with that amazing Carlos opening from the original, that, Dies Irae kind of adapted piece that is just like kind of so notable, and you guys had to take your crack at it too. So talk about all of that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was terrifying at first. Obviously, I mean, if you're not scared to do that, then something's wrong with you, and it might be okay that something's wrong with you. But like it's we don't want to, we want to do a good job for Mike and for Trevor, and we want to do a good job for the studio, and we want to make the Kubrick fans happy. I mean, at a certain point, you're not going to make everybody happy. You just have to, and that's where sort of our trust in Mike, which is, never shy. Like, we just trust him to the end. So we just followed his sort of lead in that, and we're really proud of that film on all levels. And it was such a joy to work on it, and that's same process. We have the same exhaustive R&D process at the beginning of that. A lot of the R&D we already knew, but we R&D'd it again and again so that we had all of our information as correct as it could be. And then at that point, it was just dive in and just go for it and listen to Mike and sort of follow the characters. I mean, everybody did such a great job on that. I mean, the sound design is great. The final mix is great. The acting, the directing, the cinematography is just all beautiful. And just
the set design is just out of this world. I mean,
bananas. Yeah, bananas.
The meticulous detail that went in that film is crazy.
Yeah. We actually Mike had us come out when they were filming at one point, and I think it was the first day we got to sort of the place where they were filming, and one of the producers, Scott, they were busy shooting, and one of the producers, Scott, grabbed Taylor and I, was like, "Hey, you guys want to go see the Overlook?" And we're like, "Yes." Yes. So like, it's just like, yeah, everything was incredible on that. It was we're very proud of it too. And it's a shame that not as many people saw it as we would have liked, but I think a lot more people. I'm just noticing that friends of mine are just now saying, like, "Dude, I just watched Dr. Sleep. Like, wow!" Like, and we're very proud of it.
Yeah, the critics actually really, really loved it. Surprisingly enough, it was the numbers are really high in that department. So yeah, we're both really, really, really. I mean, The Shining was one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
Growing up, and I mean, when Mike told us, we were both just like, we were super excited, and of course the fear and the all that, the darkness came in, but we were very excited, and just that whole entire, I feel like we were over prepared, if you can be over prepared, but we had so much material ready to go. We had written so much that we had just lying there ready to happen, and the process was just so much fun with, we got to try the most craziest things that we've done, actually, and I think in any film, and record all these interesting things, and then work with the orchestra. And we even got to do bizarre recording positions with the orchestra, and strange orchestrations and things that just, we had the time to do it, and it was great. And it became a real just love, a passion, a passion project, that sort of, actually. And Yeah, and I think it's funny too because, and you know, we were reading all the time while we were on it. We'd run across these stories where it was like, is it going to be like Kubrick? Is it going to be like King? And it was like this back and forth, and we were just like, oh man. And it was interestingly enough that the Kubrick estate and King both backed Mike's cut and supported him, thought it was great. And I literally was blown away by that. And it started with his script. They loved his script so much. And I mean, how do you make that happen that the studio loves it, King loves it, Kubrick's estate loves it, and then, you know, the actors were excited. I mean, we were talking to Rebecca Ferguson, and who was just like the most down-to-earth girl ever. It was just like she was just strolling in, and she was so awesome and excited, and it was just like everybody just felt sort of this, you know, they were doing something special. You know what I mean? And it really was fun. So I have nothing but fond, amazing memories of that.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you. Sorry, go ahead.
We had moments. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just.
Oh, no worries.
We had moments, many moments, during the process where we might have stayed up all night. I mean, that happened a lot. We didn't know if ideas were working. We were flying to some different locations to try some things with different musicians, and you know, we'd both just look at each other multiple times and just say like, this is what we're working on this project. This is awesome. You know, it's like so much fun when you pull yourself out of all the fear and not fear, but like, you know, there's a certain anxiety that I think is helpful. You know, I think that even pro athletes, you know, when you're trying to win the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup, the NBA finals, like you should be nervous. I think it's good. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was only going to say that, I mean, just the fact that Ella was able to come together knowing the history of how Stephen King didn't like Kubrick's version, and the fact that it satisfied everybody but still felt like a Mike Flanagan film and felt like your guys' voices in there. And it was just so meticulously well done. I was just like, wow, this movie has so much detail. It's just like every little thing I'm looking at, like the walls in the back and just the way the camera is set up and shots and everything is just fantastic.
Thank you. There was, well, that's to Mike, but there was also something, being like a bit of a music nerd, we were able to see sort of and hear all the things that Rachel and Wendy, they put forward that didn't make it into the movie. There's this whole entire, you know, there's a whole thing that happened with that film. And we kind of got to see where it went and what was written and what was used. And, you know, there were pieces of music that were just needle drops of Ligeti and Bartok that were just like on top of each other, like just together in a piece that you were just like, wait, what am I hearing? And it was just one of those things where it was just, as a fan of music, you were just, this is incredible. This is amazing that that's how this went, that it was built upon or edited upon in this way. And it was fun to be able to like talk to Mike about like, hey, we're going to pull a little bit of inspiration from here, or this is going to be new. It was so exciting working with something and seeing the sort of the origins of where it started from. And, you know, even the opening of The Shining, you know, a lot of people don't know the history of that piece. You know, so.
Oh yeah, that's Symphonie Fantastique. Yeah, just the disagreements, which is of course like an Easter egg now for composers. I'll hear it. I was watching. I bought that Friday the 13th box set that Shout Factory just did, which is a fantastic box set. But
nice.
And I'm powering through it. I forgot that I think in the fourth one, that it was just that Dies Irae just was the theme for the entire score. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was just like dun 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 dun. I was just like, okay.
so good.
So
yeah.
Good. Yeah.
But moving on from Dr. Slate, let's focus on, of course, Hill House and Bly Manor, which are anthology series. They're, of course, I think the connecting through line, of course, your music being a big part of that. So talk about, I guess, compare and contrast between the two series. The first one it's more of a gothic horror, but it was so heartfelt, and I love the story. I love the characters, and especially that, of course, that, you know, iconic now episode, was it 6, the long take one that was almost scoreless. But then you have Bly Manor, which is this, has a little bit more warmth to it, is a little bit more, I mean, it's a love story, and it ends in this beautiful kind of fashion. And just talk about really kind of racking your brains between these two worlds and kind of creating a through line between both of them.
Taylor, you want to dive in?
Sure. Yeah. I think, well, first, Mike shot obviously all of the episodes of Hill House.
Yeah, that was written, directed, like he managed
written,
all of that.
Edited, directed. He was involved in the music. I mean, he was involved like all over the place. Andy and I joked that because Andy went to see him on the set, and he was really sick at the time, and I was like, "Is he okay?" I was like, "This thing, I don't want this thing to kill. He can't die. It was just it took a lot out of him. And for season 2, he was more, he was producing and going through everything, but he had directors that he brought on that he liked and admired. And so we were talking him and kind of getting on the phone early on and for season 2, but we had obviously all of season 1 of that content, and we talked about the themes that he wanted to bring back and sort of the motifs and how we were going to expand on them. And then of course there was the Awillo Awali, which was a piece that was from The Innocents, the 1963 film, I believe it is, and how that was going to be incorporated into Bly Manor. And so we were going to do different arrangements of it and different pieces of it. And the interesting thing was that season 1 was, obviously more about the family, and we kind of played these themes for these characters in the family and how it affected them and being a part of this and growing up with that. And for season 2, for this, it's really, as you said, it's a love story, what I mean? And so we wanted to sort of, rather than play in your traditional, like, hey, this is the theme for this character, this is the theme for that character. We wanted to play more like, this is the connective tissue of love for these characters, and it sort of echoes into these other characters. And it may be, this is not a healthy love, this is a good love. And we did sort of things in it to hint and suggest certain relationships between the characters, rather than be like, hey, this is the theme for this character, which we really only did for Lady of the Lake. That's really the only character we did that for. So, Mike listened to all the music, and we were very collaborative in the interaction of how the new pieces were going to play. We wrote this new piece that was very much, I would say, this sort of cheery waltz, and Mike gravitated towards that for certain things, and then we brought back in the certain other elements and we expanded on them, which is fun because I feel like this story allowed a little bit on the music side of thing for a richer harmonic content, that we could do a little bit more with the music because we had certain spaces, or it just worked. And so we didn't have to hit people over the head with so much, but it still allowed us to expand a bit, which was great. And I think that was kind of the main difference going from season 1 to season 2, was the use and the way we kind of applied the music, and that was, yeah.
I just love that it's also based on, loosely based on Turn of the Screw, which was a novella that I kind of grew up reading Henry James's work and stuff. So it was just interesting to see not a direct adaptation, but just kind of an inspiration of taking elements and building Mike Flanagan type things around it.
Yeah.
But what I really love about both Hill House and Bly Manor, of course, is that central theme that you guys have. And talk about what was, especially when you're working with 2 anthology series with kind of a big ensemble cast, and when you have to kind of boil it down to just like a central piece of music, how does that process work, and what are you looking for to hit with that piece of music? What are you trying to capture with it?
I think that the music is, I mean, it's hard to say because it's not a specific thing that it's trying to hit. It's not even trying to hit an emotion or a specific character or a storyline, but it's almost like, and I'm not demeaning music because of this, but it's almost like punctuation. like in a sentence, right? Like you
Yeah.
put an exclamation point at the end of a sentence and it changes what that sentence is. And like a period in a sentence is what we're used to, like blah, 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 period, right? But like with the music, we're trying to have that period, like at the end of the sentence, sort of give you a, like a feeling, like, and have that feeling be sort of, you know, a statement that allows you, each individual person, to sort of experience what that story is to them individually, because it's different to all. I mean, even the three of us here right now, like each of those stories, we can talk about each of the stories and how they affected us, and it's probably similar for the most part, but we probably all have unique experiences that trigger how we feel for each of those. And so I think a lot of it, and you know, Mike was very specific in season one about being neutral with themes, you know, not being, you know, we don't need any grandiose sweeping sort of things happening, but sort of an understated, like neutral feeling that sort of takes you by the hand and like walks you through the scenes, so that you're almost, the music is almost like hopefully encouraging you to like go along with the story and let you experience what you're experiencing without sort of, you know, pushing the buttons like, okay, now you're going to cry and now you're going to be scared, you know. And that was actually the biggest challenge for us, constantly, is sort of finding that neutral ground without just being like too, you know, blah about it.
Yeah.
It's a tricky, and I can't even articulate it, because there's not like a thing we're trying to do, right? Like it'd be easy if we were like, oh yeah, well, you know, Mike really wanted everyone to cry in this scene. Never, like, not at all. Like, so that's the hard thing. It's like, cool, like what's happening in the scene and how are we responding? Okay, let's sort of play with that right now and not make it too much about like how Andy feel about what's happening with Danny right now, or how Taylor is feeling about Hannah being at the bottom of the well. You know, like I think trying to sort of thread that line in the middle of all those things is the trick.
Yeah, and I found what I love about your scores, of course, and the way you're talking. I took it as a person watching it, is that you. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned like punctuation, because I've noticed through most of all of your work with Mike is that it doesn't, it never, yeah, it's never manipulating the audience. It's never coming in and telling them how to feel. Because when I'm watching like, you know, another, you know, if it's another like a Blumhouse horror film or something where it's just really just like hammering you on the head and jump scares, which are all fun, they're fun films and
Yeah,
stuff
of
like
course.
that, or you know, where the music really just comes in and just, you know, is like Hazer has a rhythm underneath it, building tension. Whereas yeah, it feels like I watch something and the music comes in gently to kind of just like, kind of massage those emotions and feelings and bring it out. And I really love that, because it was, you're watching and I'm very usually picking up on music because of course I love it and everything, but I was like, oh wait, oh, and it was the theme coming in here, and I was like, oh, here it is, here's the music coming in. So it was an interesting experience, and the way you structured everything across the whole, 9 episodes. So
Absolutely. No, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really an aesthetic too. You know what I mean? It's the aesthetic of the vision that Mike, you know, is putting out there. And like you said, some of the Blumhouse movies are just, maybe the music is super aggressive and over the top, but that's the aesthetic that they love.
right.
And it's not wrong. It's just, that's what they love. And I think that, you know, it's finding that neutral balance where you feel something, but we're not trying to tell you to feel happy or sad necessarily. You just sort of respond, and it's sort of like almost like an echo. And it's interesting because we would see all these people ask us like, oh, I love the theme for Danny, and I would be like, oh, that's not Danny's theme. You know, in my mind I'm thinking that, but they
Yeah.
feel like it is. And or I love the music that, you know, the Lady of the Lake, she has Viola, and I love that suite. That's, you know, Viola's theme. And I'm like that's not Viola's theme, but you know, but it is
Yeah.
doing something to the emotion of that character to make them almost decide and feel things that they relate to, which is kind of what the story does. I mean, we've all experienced amazing love. I mean, some of us have, and then other horrible love. And it's like, you know what that feels like to have your heart broken. And so I think when it becomes too saccharine or too much decided on, it loses that a bit.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And when you're working on like a limited series like this, which are of course connected thematically, but and you have an end point, and you have this is where it's going to end. There's not going to be a cliffhanger. We're not going to have a season 2 that follows that story. Are you kind of are you structuring the entire score from start to finish, or are you just kind of working up? Like, I'm curious how the production was, because normal television, it's crazy schedule. You're doing kind of episode by episode. If season 2 happens, great, you can start evolving it then. But since this is kind of like almost like a long film in a sense, are you treating it more like a long film, especially with Netflix when there's no commercials and it just kind of feeds right into the next episode? It almost doesn't feel like there's an end chapter to each episode sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. We're treating it as, a long film, not 9 1-hour films or, one long film, but we definitely treat it in that way. And it's, I mean, even on the soundtrack, you can sort of tell we wanted to do the soundtrack in order for the most part. I think there's one thing that's out of order, but everything is chronological. And for that reason, like even on the soundtrack, like it kind of expands as you go, so that when you're towards the end of the soundtrack, it's sort of purposefully more involved than it is at the beginning, similar to, in following with the story and how things were progressing and evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely comes across that way.
Cool.
So congrats on Bly Manor. I thought, it was beautiful ending, everything. I mean, and it just feels like a companion piece, but also different to Hill House. So I thought it just worked really well. So hopefully, I'm hoping that the plan is to keep going, right? Is it to have a season 3?
You never know, we don't ever, we don't get that information.
Well, I've always, and again, another congratulations and more amazing work from you guys. And thank you so much for chatting today. We've hit the end of my question list, but I'm going to sit here for hours digging into your stuff. But I know you guys are busy, so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and hopefully we get to do this again. Fingers crossed. Another haunting will come along.
Yeah.
Of course, more Mike projects. Thanks again, guys.
No, thank you.
Thanks for having us. Have a great weekend.